Welcome to the All-In on Tech discussions, organized by Smart-EDU Hub. This is episode 15, titled Between Automation and Augmentation, the New Equation of Work.
It is really great to be here because today isn't just about, the future of jobs. It is about the actual changing texture of work itself.
Right, because we usually hear this very binary story online, especially if you scroll through X, formerly Twitter. Either the AI assistant takes the wheel and leaves us sipping cocktails on a beach,
or we are all entirely unemployed.
Exactly. But the reality is much messier and honestly a lot more interesting. Today, we are doing a deep dive into an article by Kaslan Vrabi from February 20, 2026.
Which was just a few months ago, yeah. He is analyzing the Anthropic Economic Index from January 2026, and the core thesis there is that we are crossing a threshold into Gen AI 2.0, essentially the era of agentic AI.
And that word agentic is key here. We aren't talking about a chatbot you ask for a pancake recipe anymore. We are talking about assistants like Claude Code or Claude Cowork. These things have agency. They execute.
Right. They don't just talk. They do. They access files. They run commands. They carry out multi-step plans. Kaslan Vrabi actually calls programming the sparrow in the hand.
Like the immediate testing ground.
Exactly. The canary in the coal mine. If you want to see where the rest of the economy in places like the United States is heading, you just look at what is happening to coders right now.
But the report suggests this brings up two very different futures that are colliding. Deskilling versus upskilling.
And this is the critical friction point for you to understand. Deskilling is the trap. Imagine a junior lawyer. If an AI assistant handles all the complex case research and strategy drafting and the lawyer just organizes the files.
They lose their edge completely.
Yes. They aren't building that necessary cognitive muscle needed to become a partner later on.
You basically become a glorified admin for the assistant. But the upskilling argument is the counter-narrative, right? Ideally, the assistant clears the boring plate, data entry, scheduling. So the human focuses purely on high-leverage strategy.
That is the dream scenario. A property manager lets the assistant balance the books so they can focus entirely on negotiating the deal. But here is the paradox Kaslan Vrabi points out. As the assistant gets better at execution, the human supervisor actually becomes more vital, not less.
Because of the human-in-the-loop factor. The data show that on long, complex tasks, success rates basically tank without human intervention.
Steeply. It shifts the entire job description from creator to manager. You aren't writing the code or the legal brief. You are reviewing, approving, and course-correcting the assistant's work.
And that leads to what Kaslan Vrabi calls the education equation. You cannot effectively supervise work you don't understand. He used that brilliant cooking an egg analogy.
It is so brilliant in its simplicity. If you ask a generic question like, how do I cook an egg? The assistant gives you a generic recipe. But if you have the technical depth to ask about the thermal coagulation of avian ovules,
you get a graduate level breakdown.
Precisely. So the quality of the output is heavily capped by the user's expertise.
Meaning, if you don't know the technical jargon or the underlying principles, you simply cannot unlock the assistant's full potential.
It completely kills the idea that this technology magically levels the playing field for everyone. To manage an expert system, you have to be an expert. You need to know enough to catch the assistant when it hallucinates or drifts off topic.
Which brings us to the ultimate survival question. If we are all shifting into management, who actually gets replaced?
It comes down to core competence. If the core of your job is digital symbol manipulation, like basic data entry, you are vulnerable. But Kaslan Vrabi points out the defensive moats. Take a microbiologist, for instance.
Right. The assistant cannot physically pipette a sample. It cannot look through the microscope eyepiece.
Exactly. Physicality and interpretation are safe zones. And this creates what the report calls the bottleneck economy. As digital tasks become cheap and infinite, value flows to the scarce resources, the things the assistant cannot do.
Physical intervention, high-stakes negotiation, genuine human connection, those are the new bottlenecks of value.
And we are seeing this play out globally, though somewhat unevenly. Wealthier nations are deploying this heavily in business, but Kaslan Vrabi notes countries like Romania, ranked 53rd in usage, are seeing massive adoption in education.
Using platforms like the Student Papers on Smart Cities and e-governance repository to democratize information. If the bottleneck is human expertise, using the assistant to accelerate education is building that future value. So the apocalypse isn't a sudden stop. It is a transition to management.
That is the main takeaway. The question isn't whether you will work, but how you will manage the work.
Which leaves you listening with a big question to mull over. Are you preparing to be an operator of tools or a manager of intelligence?
That is the specific distinction that will define your career.
That is all we have time for today. A link to the article is in the podcast description below. Goodbye, and please like and subscribe to the Smart-EDU Hub channel to be the first to enjoy new podcasts.